Yeah! What's up? This is the NBA Strategy Show right here on the Awesemo.com YouTube channel. I'm Dave Loughran. With me, Josh Engleman, and the show is sponsored by No House Advantage. Josh, how we doing today, pal?
Pretty good. Look at you getting sponsors right and everything. I didn't know we were allowed to do that. Shout out to No House Advantage for that one.
Can't get everything wrong, can you?
No. I tried to get some things right yesterday, and some of them were really, really right, and it didn't even matter. That's the worst part of it all.
What can you do? Well, anyway, we're happy to have all of you guys with us. Hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. It's the best free content you're going to get out there, so show us some love. How'd your night go last night?
So I was down. No surprises there. But I had the keys to the castle, and I just couldn't figure it out. I had over 20% Hassan Whiteside on FanDuel. Most of that I had before we even got that news. I took that chance. I had 35% David Nwaba. He was another key piece. The three top values on FanDuel were Whiteside, Nwaba, Cedi Osman. Massively over the field on all three of those guys, and I didn't even sniff the top 1,000 because Ben Simmons decided to play basketball for the first time in his career.
Yeah. Isn't it wild that when that guy decides he wants to score, he can just score at will almost?
Yeah,
That was against Utah too, who protects the paint extraordinarily well.
He did whatever he wanted to. He got to the rack at will, aggressively. I mean, he looked fantastic, and it just makes me wonder why the hell he doesn't do that more often.
I know. I tweeted yesterday, Josh, that people get excited about it, but that Ben Simmons great game was nothing but frustrating to me because he's going to wait 2 months to try it again. And I get that Embiid was out, right? So he's not clogging up the paint, but that's not a good enough excuse because it's not like Joel Embiid is a player who is entirely incapable of drifting out. His mid-range game is filthy good right now. He's knocking down threes at almost 40%. That's no excuse for Ben Simmons not to want to score.
No, and that doesn't stop you from aggressively getting into the paint too. By you by you getting there that quickly, they're going to scramble. You are an athletic marvel out on the floor. Just keep doing that, man. I don't obviously it's not going to be like that if Joel Embiid is there just because the entire offense is going to shift slightly. But that doesn't mean that's not what you should be doing normally. So I don't know. It was wild. I didn't enjoy watching it at all.
No.
By the way, 1 year ago yesterday, NBA All-Star game, which means that that's how we paid off the Pocky chip.
Yeah. That's how you lost the bet.
Yes.
I, as a great friend, decided to go and take the dive with you. By the way, one day I will reveal something to you that I think you'll get a kick out of, but I think I must hold off for a little bit longer. Maybe.
I don't even know what this could be. Did you fake late swap and you should have lost or something?
No.
Fake chip?
One day, it has to do with all of that went down, that transpired over those few weeks between the All-Star break and the chip challenge. One day I will reveal it to you right here on the show, but I don't think we're there yet. Not yet. Anyway.
I hate you for this. I hate this so much. I hate not knowing things. It's so miserable.
In other news, how good are the Utah Jazz? I honestly think that this team. I thought about putting a futures bet on them to win the finals. That's how good they are. I know it sounds crazy, right? I get it. I said it to Ben last night. Our boy Jazzraz. I was like, I get that it sounds nuts, but what I've seen from this team on the season, and then against Milwaukee, running them off the court. Of course, they didn't have Holiday still. Running Miami off the court back to back, then running off the Sixers. Of course, no Joel Embiid, but the point still remains. They didn't have Mike Conley. This team looks phenomenal right now, Josh. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but Jordan Clarkson, you want to talk about a player that is making a massive difference, is the clear shoe-in for sixth man as long as he doesn't get hurt. This is a really good basketball team.
Yeah, I wonder if they're just uniquely set up to be really good in the regular season. We're talking about a team that doesn't really have any turnover. The only guy that they really brought in that's changing their team at all is Derek Favors, a guy that played multiple years in Utah. So it's not like he had to integrate in any weird way. I think the biggest piece for it really is, and it's a little bit different with Conley out. And they're obviously fantastic. I have no doubts in their performance whatsoever. Conley's finally understanding how to play with Rudy Gobert. He went from a pick and pop threat for Marc Gasol, delivering a ball on a pick and roll and a or a pick and pop in that scenario in a much different way than a full-on only roll threat and lob threat like Gobert. That takes some time to get used to. I mean, Mike Conley played the same way for like 8 straight seasons and then, looked like garbage last year. And now probably the best player on the Jazz so far this season.
It's crazy. And you're probably right. Once you get to the postseason, maybe they won't be, maybe they are uniquely set up to win in the regular season, but they look really good. And they're just finding ways to produce points with their bench and with their starters. And they're making, yesterday was very unique in that Ben Simmons went for 42 and probably could have gone for 50, had a couple of those not rolled out of the rim, but they're a good team. My best lineup yesterday, I played 3 lineups. My best lineup had 5 Houston Rockets in it, okay? Had Nwaba, Tate, Cousins, Daniel House, and 4. No, John Wall as well. So it had 5. With Bradley Beal and Chetty Osman and James Harden, right?
Yeah.
Solid lineup. Didn't make a difference. You needed 400 plus easy to win anything. Even in the 3 max or single entries, you needed upwards of 380, 390, and the 21 from Cousins only playing 20 minutes was a backbreaker in this lineup because everyone else popped off monster games, huge value at their price points, and I think a lot of people dealt with that. If you had Cousins, you weren't winning because you needed it to be perfect last night.
Yeah, the Cousins performance was not ideal, that's for sure.
Still
I'm getting a lot of people letting me know that I was wrong about James Harden last night, which is a real hilarious take.
What'd you say about Harden that you would have been wrong about?
So Alex had him projected for like just north of 60 fantasy points. I had it basically like just north of 50. And I really didn't understand how we were so off. I mean, normally Alex and I are off by like a point, maybe 2. Like there's never that sort of disparity. And this is just 2 wildly different projections. 1, this is one day, so I don't care about one individual data point. But 2, projecting him for 60 and him hitting his median projection and projecting him for 50 and hitting like what would amount to be like a 60th percentile outcome and my projections are basically the same thing. Like they're not, there's no right or wrong on a projection.
I hear you. Yeah, look, James Harden, yesterday, it wasn't that he scored 40 points. He scored 29, but he had a monster triple-double, and, that we all know he's very capable of doing that.
Yeah.
So, that's what you get. I had a decent DFS night. It was in the black, so I'm not going to complain, but don't worry, we'll get to these games in just a minute. Had a great betting night, though. It's just one of those nights where all the pieces came together, jumped on a lot of lines early in the day, got some movement, and hit all of them, beat the closing line, and then actually win the bet. It's a good feeling. And Josh, on the Cool Cats pack, I pulled a number 3 Stephen Curry. A number 3 Steph Curry in a $14 pack. That made my night.
Oh, interesting. I had a very different experience. Instead of pulling a number 3 Steph Curry, I clicked refresh to get in line for that pack, waited hours, and didn't even get one because I was number 60-something thousand in the queue. So Top Shot is a sham.
If you didn't fall asleep, you probably would have still gotten it because a lot of payments failed.
Yeah, great. I'm sorry that I couldn't sit around for 4 hours waiting for a $9 pack of digital highlights. Give me a break.
Listen, man, if I can come out and flip this for several thousand, which I probably can, yeah. I don't care. I don't care if it's a piece of shit with a flower on top of it. I'll sell it.
I agree. I'm trying to participate. They won't let me.
I know.
I'm doing everything I can to buy a pack. I'm not confused by the technology. I understand how to buy cryptocurrency. I've been doing this shit for a while. I just simply cannot get their product, even if I try.
Yeah, I mentioned to someone that your experience is duplicated by many, and it's an issue for sure.
It's preposterous. And I haven't even started the process of like being able to withdraw, which is going to be me messaging you or Adam or Ben, being like, "How much do you want to buy my Dapper balance for?"
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's not going to be fun.
Because there's no chance I'm trying to withdraw that legitimately.
No, I got in early enough to where it was like a lot easier barrier to entry, a lot smaller barrier to entry because nobody was doing it. There were like a couple thousand people. Now it's absurd. Anyway, you ready to dive into this? We got 6 games to hit on.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Those intros are always fun, though. You got it. We got
an easy one. Tomorrow we are straight federally fudged.
What do we got?
Because 12.
Oh. All right. You got to work the room sometimes. With a 12 gamer, it's just jump right into it. We're not going to have
it. Doesn't even matter if we jump right into it. There is no chance that we can do that show in 90 minutes.
90? Yeah, we can. 90. I give it 87 minutes. We'll get it banged out.
We're going to need to get some DoorDash Starbucks for Jordan to be able to stay awake for that one tomorrow.
All right, let's do it. Denver and Boston. Denver Nuggets dealing with a decent amount of injuries, Josh, coming off a nice win against the Lakers, which, by the way, I'm just throwing this out there. This is something to keep in mind, okay? With the Lakers, without Anthony Davis, they have not been very good. When he went down, you should have hammered Denver live because this, you know what I mean? The last several games that he's been out, they went to overtime twice against OKC, who was down all of their top players, and then got smoked by Detroit. They're still a much better team than these other teams. And they came back from a 20-point deficit against Memphis. They're a better team, but the Lakers without Anthony Davis are not nearly as good as they should be. So something to keep in mind. We'll get to them in a little bit. But what are you doing with Denver?
Have you looked at any of their data with AD off?
Say it again?
Have you looked at any of their data with AD off? I haven't. I'm not like leading you into this. I just have no idea how they've been playing with him not on the floor.
I haven't, but I've watched and bet almost all of those games. And I guess you could say it's just like a subjective view, an arbitrary view of what's going on. But I don't know if it is because they just don't look good when Anthony Davis is off the floor. And is it that shocking?
They also shouldn't.
Wait, I was saying, is it that shocking? Look at the rest of their players not named LeBron James.
Yeah, he's also one of the 5 best players in the NBA. Like, you're clearly going to be worse. In 1,100 possessions with AD off, they're plus 5.2, but they have a 36th percentile offense, which isn't really all that surprising. Like, they don't have a lot of skilled offensive players. Their defense is still amazing because, I mean, that's sort of their team. But the lineup that they have that's played the most minutes is negative 17.5 in 135 possessions.
Whew.
Anyway,
we can talk about that once we get to the Lakers.
I was just really curious about it. I hadn't thought about it if they had like a really big fall off. I'm surprised the defense has been good.
Yeah, they really can't score unless it's LeBron getting to the rim. So it'll be interesting to see how they play tonight. I still think they smoke Minnesota because Minnesota's that bad. So maybe I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, Josh, but the Timberwolves are a perfect remedy to a poor playing team without one of their top players. But Denver doesn't have Will Barton. They don't have Paul Millsap. They don't have Gary Harris. They don't have PJ Dozier. They might not have Monty Morris. Could be a very shorthanded team tonight against the Celtics, who, by the way, have been playing really, really rough basketball lately, losing games to teams that they should be beating. And it makes for an interesting matchup at TD Garden.
Yeah, this Denver team could be pretty wild tonight. The Monty Morris news is really important because that could potentially open up Facundo Campazzo as an even better value play. I have him in for 20 minutes now. He's the flat minimum on FanDuel, 3,300 on DraftKings. If Morris is out, he's going to become a very popular value play. But this is the most popular team on the slate, I believe. Jokic, Porter, Monty Morris, JaMychal Green, all north of 20% ownership on FanDuel. Jokic is at 30. Michael Porter Jr. is at 40. He's the chalk of all chalk today because he's 5,500 on FanDuel, 5,800 on DK. No Paul Millsap. I mean, no anybody on this team. They're missing like 4 dudes that play regularly large minutes, which is kind of insane. I think Porter is the best play here. I don't think it's particularly close. I think Nikola Jokic, though, is the guy that we need to talk about. He's 10-6 on FanDuel, 10-7 on DraftKings. I'm not entirely sure why he's getting owned the way that he is. I think he's wildly over-owned right now, and I wanted to get your thoughts because I don't really see him as a 30% guy on FanDuel today.
Interesting. Okay, so I think one of the big things here is how much. Let's break this down, right? Let's start from the top, work through this.
Yeah.
How much influence do we anticipate no Millsap and Barton and Gary Harris having on Nikola Jokic? Because if it's Jamal Murray, we're talking about a pretty big influence. We've already discussed that earlier this week when Jamal Murray was questionable. I think that was on Sunday, as a matter of fact. You and I did the strategy show.
Yeah.
Like Jamal Murray being out, huge for Nikola Jokic. Jokic is already fantastic. But when you're getting that much ownership I guess it's time to compare him to the rest of the players on this slate. You have Giannis against Toronto. You have Harden, second of a back-to-back, but no Durant against the Phoenix team that's playing great defense lately. Then you have Jokic at 10-7, LeBron James at 10-1 without Anthony Davis, Lillard against OKC at 9,700. There are a lot of good players in really good spots with somewhat affordable price points on this slate.
Yeah, Cantor in particular, 6,600, no Harry Giles today for Portland. I think he is a significantly better play than Nikola Jokic. Now, don't get me wrong. I still think Jokic is good. I have him showing up in the optimal lineup on FanDuel 16% of the time. He's still fantastic. He's projected for north of 50. But with the way that salaries are set up, I greatly prefer paying up for Giannis today over Jokic. I understand that Jokic should smash a Boston team. They're not really you set up to stop him all that well. But I'm a little surprised at how owned Jokic is going in GPPs. Porter's the guy that I want to hitch my wagon to. I'd like to get to Jamal Murray if he's going to be this low owned. Jamal Murray's projected for 5% ownership on a 6-game slate today. He's 7,200 on DraftKings. That's a terrible price tag. But if he's 5% owned, I feel like Jamal Murray gets up for these kind of games where if Tatum starts going or Jaylen Brown starts going, he's just right there doing this. The same sort of Donovan Mitchell effect that we see in the postseason. This could be a spot for Murray because I feel like this is the type of game he goes for.
It's possible. And the one thing we know about Murray is he's volatile, right? There's no doubt about that because he's not an elite passer. He's not the best rebounder for a point guard, but he can have those games where he just rattles off 35, 40 real points. And I like that, especially in what's expected to be a competitive game. Michael Porter Jr. on DraftKings is getting more ownership, not than anyone on this team or even in this game, but more ownership right now than anyone on this slate, Josh. And of course, no Millsap, no Barton, no Harris. You're missing wings. You're missing a 4. That's going to play pretty heavily into the appeal for Michael Porter Jr. But he just, he has not been that great. He's a +1 per minute guy, but coming off 30 minutes last game, 17, 31 the game before that, 26. Do you think it really doesn't even matter? And it's just, okay, he's affordable. He should play 30 plus minutes and he's going to be out there with a bunch of inactives. You got to keep playing Michael Porter Jr.
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer, really. 5,500 on FanDuel at small forward is just his price doesn't even is so low for the amount of minutes that he should play. I mean, if he doesn't play north of 30, I don't know who's playing for them. Marcus Howard, I don't even know what that is. Right. His price just isn't where it needs to be to make this a discussion. And now with Millsap out, that's just even more minutes that he can actually play at a position he's probably more suited for in the 4. I don't think that he gets a ton of time there just because of JaMychal Green, but it opens up a spot. He shouldn't really be playing the 3 in the NBA, but he is. So he's just, to me, basically the best mid-price guy on the slate, and it's not close. That's why you see him at 40% ownership on FanDuel. It's a huge number. It
is a huge number. And when you start running the on-offs, he benefits without Will Barton. There's no question about it. I think it doesn't matter if he's been great or not. And pretty much exactly what you just said. At that price point on DraftKings and FanDuel, I think both of them, he's just way too viable if he's playing 30 plus. I'd love to know that he could play 35. I'm not sure that's the case. But 1.1 fantasy points per minute in 158 minutes without Barton and Millsap on the floor this year, that's more than good enough at that price point. So he's the top option from Denver. But if Monte Morris sits, this is where it gets a little bit weird, and you kind of already teased it a little bit because there's no Barton, there's no Millsap, there's no Harris, there's no PJ Dozier either. Then if you remove Monte Morris from the roster or from the actives tonight, who do you see, and not just in Morris's case, but with all of these guys being out, who do you see benefiting the most from all of these absences?
I mean, Facundo Campazzo has to be the guy. If Morris ends up out, I think he just sort of has to soak up most of that time. You would have to think RJ Hampton is going to pick up enough minutes to become a viable value option. He's 4,200 on FanDuel, which is kind of tough, but 3,400 on DraftKings. I think that opens him up a little bit more. I'd be lying if I knew how many minutes Zeke Naji would end up playing. Doesn't seem like those minutes would free up for him. I think it would be more likely that we just see enough minutes go to someone like Marcus Howard just as a positional thing. I don't think that he would become a value play.
And Ball isn't even seeing the floor.
No, well, he's terrible. So.
Yeah. People love it, though. People love it.
Yeah, like, I wish he was good, but he's just not good. No matter, like, he's never going to be strong enough to be good.
No. 7'9" small forward.
Yeah. So if we say that Morris is out, clearly I still like Murray and Porter and Jokic as much or more than I did before. Then you just have to start thinking through like what these rotations could be. Campazzo is the first guy up. I'd say that Zeke Naji is probably 2. I think there's a ceiling to how much JaMychal Green will end up being out there, but he'll be fine no matter what. He's already picking up a ton of ownership as well. So Campazzo would be the guy that I would want to make sure that everybody's looking at.
JaMychal Green, and then we'll get to Boston. I promise we're not going to take this long on every game because this one actually has a ton of moving parts that it's pretty important. I'm just looking over JaMychal Green's playing time, and yeah, I think you're right in that there's a cap, like 27 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily see him playing a boatload of minutes, Josh, no matter what the case is. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he does come out there and play 30 plus, but I would be very surprised by that. And
well, here's one for you. I have him projected for 28 minutes. He's 27% owned on FanDuel, 28% owned on DraftKings. I have him around 15%. So even giving him what I think is a pretty rosy minutes projection, I still think he's not the guy that I want to get to.
Okay. I'm assuming you're going to have some of the guy, though, just given his price point.
Yeah, a 6-game slate. I mean, look, when I have a guy that I think should be like 14% owned and he's projected for 27% ownership, I'm probably going to end up with like 14% of JaMychal Green.
Right. And by the way, if he's, do you assume he'll start?
I
feel like he will.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, we'll see. That's why we got the deeper dive live before lock, the tip-off show, all that great stuff. He's got a 19.8% usage rate this year, but that's going to drop considerably in the starting lineup. So really, you're just hoping he knocks down the handful of shots that he gets.
Yep.
On Boston, like I said, they've really been playing pretty awful basketball lately, and they're a much better team than they currently have played. So I anticipate them turning this around eventually, Josh. But blowout loss against Washington, they lost at home to Detroit. It's been rough, but at the same time, this is one against a banged up Denver team, 3.5 point spread. Sorry. Does anyone for Boston stand out to you?
Sort of. We're doing that whole Kemba Walker thing on FanDuel again. He's 6,200. I think he looks like a really good play. He's already 29% owned. So I would say that I think that he looks over owned. Like, Kemba Walker is my favorite play from Boston, but I think he's over owned. So you do what you want with that sort of information. If you get to Tatum or Brown, I think both guys are viable, but they're much more viable on DraftKings than they are on FanDuel. Jason Tatum's 8,700 on DK. Jaylen Brown is 7,800. These are guys with like 30% usage rates this year, even with Kemba Walker on the floor. Like, not like on the floor properly, but like not taking him off. So I like getting to like 10 to 15% of Tatum and Brown. I like getting to about 15 to 20 of Kemba Walker. Daniel Tice will be interesting, 5,200 on FanDuel, 4,600 on DraftKings. He's someone that I have my eye on. He is questionable, so that will play a little bit of a role in this as we move forward. If he ends up out, have to assume Grant Williams picks up some run. He's 3,600 on FanDuel and 3,400 on DK. So if we don't see Tice, if Grant Williams can get locked into like 23, 24 minutes, I think he becomes a value play. We don't have a ton of like low-priced value guys so far on the slate. But if we're looking at this game and everybody is in, Tatum, Brown, Walker, Tice are the only 4 guys that I'll be looking at. No interest in Pritchard. I don't think that Semi Ojeleye is going to continue to be a Boston hero like he has been for the past 2 games. It's mostly just the big 4.
Okay. Top options from this game overall.
Okay, so on FanDuel, it's Porter and Murray for me. On DraftKings, it's Porter and, if he plays, Monty Morris at 4,400, which I think would change as value opens up, but there aren't a lot of guys down in that 4,400 range.
All right. Let's go to New Orleans and Memphis. This game last night opened as a pick'em, and it's still pretty close to that. 1 point spread. New Orleans laying 1 point on the road, 231 total. It's the funny thing is both of these teams have been equally disappointing and underwhelming this year, Josh. But I guess that's par for the course with the Pelicans. Memphis going to be without Melton and without Bane. We can get to that in a minute, but let's start it off with New Orleans here, a team that essentially has a lot of very similar per minute guys, and that's why every single time they're on the floor, or every time they're on the slate, they just don't get a lot of ownership skewed towards any one specific player ever.
Yeah, I don't really know what to do with this game at all. Like, obviously, Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram in the eights are guys you just kind of play no matter what in like the 10 to 20% range. They have the same prices pretty regularly. They have the same sort of output pretty regularly, and they're filler. You hope you get them on the day where the shot is falling a little bit more than usual. Similar story sort of for Memphis with like Ja Morant, Jonas Valanciunas, Dylan Brooks. These guys all just sort of have the same role pretty regularly. Like we have Zion, Ingram, and Bledsoe in the teens in ownership on FanDuel, only Ingram in double digits on DraftKings. And I basically agree with all of that. Like no one really stands out. I don't see anybody as a smash play or like an incredible value. It's just, you kind of need to have a little bit of the main people, the guys that are going to play like 28 minutes or more for New Orleans. And the same sort of story for Memphis. Dylan Brooks is chalky. I don't want to eat all of that chalk, but I think you have to play him. The most that anybody's owned on DraftKings from Memphis is like 10 to 12%. I think that's about right for all of these guys. They're just filler. You'll end up with a lot of people randomly from New Orleans and Memphis, but I can't really advocate for anybody that I think is like dramatically underowned or mispriced or undervalued.
Yo, Ricondo Crutchfield says, Josh, thanks for putting me on Whiteside. Won that bread in the $8, $2,000.
There you go, man.
All right.
That was one thing that, I got lucky, obviously. We had like 5 blocks, but the moment Rashawn Holmes got put on that injury report halfway through the day, I took him out and started planning accordingly. Same sort of story for Chetty Osman. The moment Taurean Prince hit the injury report in the middle of the day, took him out, went to Chetty, got there earlier. I think that set me up to have at least a little bit more exposure. But the way that late swaps are going so far in COVID time, it's not that those things had anything to do with COVID, but I want to get there early rather than late, make sure that I have enough room in the late slate to move my guys around.
Well, hey, we talked about this on Sunday, right? The volatility oftentimes is accompanied by blocks and steals and stuff like that. So there are times where players like that just have a brutally low floor and other times where they have a monster game. And when you can get 5, 6, 7, 8 blocks like Hassan Whiteside can, it's, putting you in a good spot for sure.
Yeah. I wish I had more to say about New Orleans and Memphis, but it's kind of gross.
Yep. All right. I think we have struck a nerve with 2K Apedia in chat because he is apparently not taking he's not taking it lightly that we said Ball is not very good. So for him, if you put him on another team, he'd be an all-star.
Yeah, 44th pick in the draft, second rounder that doesn't play for 2 years.
All-star, Josh, all-star.
Clearly, we're missing something and not literally everyone else.
Yeah, no, he's an all-star. Just give him usage, give him minutes. He's an all-star.
Yep. Exactly.
Anything else for New Orleans and Memphis?
No. Favorite plays on FanDuel, Zion, Dylan Brooks, Eric Bledsoe. Favorite plays on DraftKings, Zion, and I can't even say that anybody else is a favorite at that point.
All right. Let's talk about Toronto and Milwaukee. This will get a little bit interesting, right? The Bucks 5.5 point favorites, 235.5 total. That's what I like about this one for pretty obvious reasons, right? It's supposed to be a high scoring game. You've seen a lot of that with Milwaukee this season. On the year, Milwaukee's playing at a top 10 pace, the 6th fastest pace in the league. Toronto's climbing up the ranks too, playing 12 right outside of that top 10, pretty much tied in the top 10. So high scoring game. Let's start with Toronto, the same team that was making some inquiries regarding Andre Drummond just the other day or just yesterday. What do you think about Fred VanVleet, Lowry, and Siakam, all of whom are pretty close in their ability to produce?
I thought you were about to ask me if I thought that Andre Drummond was going to get to Toronto in a trade, and I was going to say absolutely not, but that's neither here nor there.
Why not?
I can't make those contracts work. It's too difficult. I'd be very surprised if he ends up in Toronto on a trade. He's destined for a buyout.
Okay.
Anyway, Fred VanVleet's price on FanDuel is starting to come back down. He's 7,500 now. Ownership is also, though, already there. 31% projected ownership for VanVleet. So while I like him, I wouldn't want to be going well north of 30. The guy that I want to have a conversation about right now, Chris Boucher, is 7,200 on FanDuel. He's 6,600 on DraftKings. He's projected for 5% ownership on FanDuel and 2 on DK. I am terrified to roster this guy, but he's such a permanent marvel that I don't really know what else to do. I have him in for 26 minutes, and I think that Chris Boucher is like massively under-owned. I have him finishing in the optimal lineup on DraftKings 13% of the time compared to 2% ownership. This is a guy that I would want to be like many multiples of over the field. Am I crazy for Boucher? Like, what are your thoughts on him?
No, I don't think you're ever crazy on a guy like Boucher.
Okay.
The playing time, okay, so I think I mentioned this to you last week or maybe on Sunday. He was pacing 29 minutes in a lot of these games, or at least 28 minutes in these games, had it not been a blowout. Does that sound like a lot? No, but it's a lot better than 25 or 24, which would have put him at 27, 20, or 33, 29, 28, 28, and then 18 in that last game against Minnesota. So we've seen now 5 of his last 6 games, he's been on pace because he would have closed them out had it not been for blowouts. He's on pace to play 27 plus minutes. So taking into account his per minute production, I don't think it's crazy at all to say a guy that on DraftKings at least is averaging almost 1.3 DraftKings points per minute in a game with a 235.5 total is a bad tournament option at virtually no ownership.
Yeah, I'm going to really keep my eye on that ownership number. If he's super low owned, being able to get like 4 times the field, 5 times the field on a 2 to 4% owned guy, those are the spots where those margins really begin to help you out and allow you to do some other things. Kyle Lowry looks. Go ahead.
You could be at 10%, which is not a backbreaker if he has a bad game, and still be 5x the field.
I mean, even Adam talks about this a lot. Like, even if Chris Boucher has a bad game, like, he then becomes like a 1 fantasy point per minute guy in 20 minutes. Right. Like, it's really hard for him to come out here and hang like 6.
Yeah. The only concern is that Nick Nurse just decides because he can to limit his playing time.
Yeah. Which could certainly happen. Anything could pop up for Nurse. They could play Siakam more at the 5 or go to Stanley Johnson. Who the hell knows? But for now, I think Boucher is one of my favorite contrarian plays of the day.
Yeah, and it's tough to take anything away from Popcorn Machine because they have 7 guys playing the entire 4th quarter.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's not great. They have Boucher playing the entire 4th quarter, which I think he played 9, 10, 11. Yeah, he didn't play at all in the 4th quarter. So
no, it's kind of wacky.
Anybody else from Toronto?
Not really. Like Siakam, you know what you're getting out of Siakam, VanVleet, and Lowry. You just try to play these guys when their salaries move around a little bit. VanVleet, I think, over-owned on FanDuel, but you still need to get to him. He's one of the better options. Norm Powell, I guess, is probably a little under-owned on FanDuel at 6,500. OG, still doubtful, but nobody truly standing out outside of VanVleet and Boucher for me.
Yeah, Fred VanVleet, 1.12 fantasy points per minute on the year. Siakam, 1.11. Kyle Lowry, 1.05. Boucher's up there at 1.25. But of those 3 guys that get the minutes, either make it about positional scarcity, which you might have to do sometimes.
Yeah.
But where, Siakam might be a lot more appealing at power forward than a point guard where you just have a wealth of options. But even usage here, Siakam is 25, VanVleet's 23, Lowry's 22. There's no real big time discrepancy there between the numbers. So
no, you just have to hope you get that one right for the day.
And they're all pretty close in price, especially on DraftKings. So what about Milwaukee starting it off with Giannis Antetokounmpo? $11,000 on DraftKings, on FanDuel, $11,200. And, of course, one of the best per minute guys in the entire world.
He looks incredible today, showing up really highly in my Sims. I have him projected for 57 fantasy points, and I'm probably low, and I still like him. He's been picking it up a little bit as of late, getting himself back on the top of most normal rate list. He has the most fantasy points per minute over the past 2.5 weeks. So slowly getting back up into that 1.62 fantasy point per minute range. Both he and Embiid tied over that same sort of range. I don't really have much else to say. I think it's a really nice spot for Giannis. Toronto was sort of problematic for him in the past because they had Ibaka and Gasol, two guys that were pretty good at protecting the paint. They don't really have that any longer. It's certainly not Boucher or Aaron Baines. So I think Giannis can really thrive here. And no Drew Holiday. So even more of a little bit of a bump up for Giannis getting back to his normal sort of role. I have no issue getting there pretty heavily. I'd like to get pretty heavy on Chris Middleton as well. 7,500 on FanDuel, 8K on DK. I think he's more than worth the price tag there. Dante DiVincenzo, 5,100 and 5,400. I'd like to have a bunch of even $3,800 Bryn Forbes on DraftKings. I think is a value play on a slate where we don't really have a ton of it. I like Milwaukee a lot. The ownership is already there, but I mean, Giannis and Chris Middleton are two of the top, 15, 20 players in the league?
Yeah, Middleton at least top 50.
Oh, you're killing me here. I can't do this. I can't.
I like
He's the most underrated player in the league.
It has been interesting to see what this team looks like without Drew Holiday, though, and I think he is not to execs and GMs and coaches, but I think to the average casual fan, Holiday is one of the more underappreciated players in basketball. Really good player.
Doesn't ask for anything, will fit in anywhere, has the skill set you're looking for, bust his ass on defense. Like it's exactly what you're looking for.
Like he's just never going to hurt a team.
Nope. No chance. He would fit on any other team in the league. And that's a skill set that you don't see. And that's why, these type of guys get paid and get traded for, because you can move Drew Holiday anywhere and he does not affect the chemistry of a basketball team.
Yep. It's just a shame he had to play with Philly and New Orleans his whole career. Maybe
the New Orleans one is really weird. Do we just hang that one on management? I mean, like he and AD are a pretty decent twosome as like two young dudes. I don't know why that breaks, but it broke wrong.
It is a good question. They had a lot of ways to make that work and a lot of good players that have come through that organization, and it just never, ever worked. I mean, Not only did it not work, but they couldn't even make the playoffs. Remember they had, what was it? Randall, Holiday. Did Randall ever play with Davis?
I can't even remember my head around. Boogie was playing really well there until he got hurt.
Yeah, remember they had Nikola Mirotic, who was until Bobby Portis, put him to sleep. Oof. They had some good players. It's just they've even this year, man. Ingram's playing great. You got Zion, Lonzo's playing better. They got Josh Hart's a solid option off the bench. They got a bunch of guys that you would think they'd be decent, and here they are sitting, outside of the playoffs, outside looking in. Again, I don't know what to make of them.
No idea. Well, this much I could tell you, since we're circling. This got all started on a Drew Holiday conversation, a guy that's not even playing today. Play a lot of Giannis and a lot of Chris Middleton.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Hit that thumbs up for us, guys, and subscribe to the channel. Hammer that thumbs up if you like what we do here. All right, so we got 3 down, 3 to go. Before we do, I think it's time that we talk for a second about our sponsor, No House Advantage, because why would we not want to do that? And why would you not just essentially want to get free money, because free money is great. And you don't get a lot of that these days in the DFS world, maybe in the sports betting world, right? People trying to get you over to the site, want you to play there. They'll give you some huge free bets, some big deposit bonuses. Well, at No House Advantage, if you use the promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO, you will get your first deposit matched up to $20, which is pretty solid to head over there, play peer-to-peer player prop bets in a contest form where you're taking the highest confidence interval. The ones you like the best get the most points. So if you feel like something is a lock, you put it number 1. If you don't like one too much, you put it number 8. Contest GPP structure. But Josh, the part I always say is the best is not the deposit bonus. It's the fact that we have projections at Awesemo that are entirely free. We have an optimal lineups tool for No House Advantage at awesemo.com that is entirely free. And these odds don't change throughout the day. So you're getting that edge to figure out where the good ones are just by using reference with our Awesemo tools that are entirely free.
Yeah, the optimal lineup tool for No House Advantage is a true game changer, and I feel like that's probably getting slept on across the industry. It should be ultra popular. even if you're like not super comfortable with the No House Advantage product, because it is a little bit of a different experience. You're ranking player props and confidence intervals. It's a different layout. But with the stuff that we're providing and with pretty regular overlay opportunities, this is an excellent spot for you to try to build your bankroll. Rely on the tools from Alex. Tackle some contests that have limited rake or potentially no rake, and get yourself a little bit of scratch together. It's the easiest way to do that.
Yeah, even if you were to say like, all right, I'm going to build that bankroll up and then take some of it over to DraftKings with some of the bigger prize pools, you could do that. But, find ways to build your bankroll. And right now that is through a place like No House Advantage. So it's very simple. Go to nohouseadvantage.com or download the app. Check it out today. Use that promo code Awesemo to get a first match deposit up to $20 when you sign up. All right, Josh, Lakers, Minnesota. We already kind of chopped it up over LeBron James and Anthony Davis earlier in the show when we kicked this off. Davis is out at least 2 to 3 weeks, and this team has just not looked very good when he is not on the floor. Will that happen again today against Minnesota? It's hard to say. I still think the Lakers handle business, but we got to talk about what they look like now from a DFS perspective without Anthony Davis in the rotation.
I think they stink. it's really that simple. Like, we got LeBron
good.
We have LeBron at like 30% ownership. That feels wildly too high to me. Just not at all interested in being that high on LeBron James at 10-5 and 10-1. Not that I don't like him, but I just think that there are easier options to go to in like the 9s. So he's fine. It's whatever. Kuzma sees a bump, but he's already 14% owned on FanDuel. He's 5,800 on FanDuel already and 7K on DraftKings. I don't want to play 7K for Kyle Kuzma. Not interested at all there. It's LeBron, a little bit of Schroeder, a little bit of Montrezl Harrell, 6,200. He's projected for 1.3% ownership on DraftKings. That's another spot where like I'd be happy to get 10% of on a 6-gamer. But as far as I'm concerned, like I don't expect to have much of the Lakers at all today. In fact, if I just look at how often, like just in the aggregate, teams show up in the optimal, the Lakers are second worst behind Brooklyn for me today. And I'm obviously a little lighter on Brooklyn on a day-to-day basis, which I guess we'll get to. I have very little interest in the Lakers. I have a feeling the most important thing for the Lakers will be figuring out who plays the final 10 minutes after they smack Minnesota.
And it's been kind of tough to figure out what this rotation looks like because Vogel's done different things with them in the games that Anthony Davis has been out, Josh. Like you haven't seen the same rotations. You haven't seen even the same starting lineups in all these games.
No, they're going to be yanking people around, inserting Markieff Morris and Caruso and Taylor Horton-Tucker and Wesley Matthews. They've got a lot of like type guys that don't matter how you put them in there. Matthews, THT, Markieff Morris, Caruso, you can rotate through any of those guys and let them start, and they're all equally as unappealing. We have THT 10% owned on FanDuel, 15% owned on DraftKings. I understand why it's happening because we don't have a ton of value out there. I'm not even like, he doesn't even have to be the guy that gets more minutes. They could easily go to more Wesley Matthews. They could easily just go to additional run for Markieff Morris. They could easily throw additional run at Alex Caruso. I have no confidence in this. I definitely don't want to ride chalk on the Lakers that isn't starting.
Yeah, I agree. Taylor Horton-Tucker, by the way, for anyone that was wondering, the acronym THT, he's getting some ownership. It's kind of weird, honestly. Kyle Kuzma started the second half of last game, but you can't glean a ton from that and what his overall playing time would have looked like. They emptied the bench in the final 4 or 5 minutes of that one. They were getting blown out by Denver. So, yeah, it's tough, Josh. Now, I will say this much. Depending on what the starting lineup looks like, I think we can maybe glean something from that. Yeah. I don't know who's going to start. I'm assuming Kuzma, but if it was Markieff Morris, I wouldn't be shocked by that either. There could be a handful of guys that start this game, and I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, not ideal to figure that stuff out. This game locks at 8:00, so we probably don't know that heading into real lock. We only missed one game, though, because only one 7:00 tip, no 7:30 tip. So the only one that locks before that is actually Denver-Boston. Oh, interesting. What New Orleans and Memphis is at 8?
Yep, New Orleans, Memphis, Toronto, Milwaukee, Lakers, Minnesota, Portland, OKC. All of those games are at 8:00.
Wow, 4 Spurs test positive for COVID. Next 3 Spurs games postponed. Next 2 Hornets games postponed.
Okay.
Wild. Sorry, I just saw that coming through.
Yeah,
I don't know. Hopefully not Pop.
Yeah, right. Who do you have starting for? Let's close this team with.
Yeah.
Who do you have starting for the Lakers? That can give us at least a little bit better reference here.
So no matter what, it doesn't really matter too much what they do at center, whether that's Gasol or Harrell. Like, that's just going to rotate through. I assume it's Gasol, but that's not really the piece. LeBron, obviously. Schroeder, obviously. I would say KCP would be the fourth. And then you're trying to cross your fingers to figure out if it's Kyle Kuzma, Markieff Morris, Tucker, or Wes Matthews. If I had to guess, I would say that it's Kuzma. That would be the first direction that I would go. And because of his price tag, it doesn't matter, because you should not be paying $7K Kyle Kuzma on DraftKings. That's an insane price tag. What we're hoping for is that it's one of those other guys. And I don't really see the need to be aggressive on anybody else that isn't starting for the Lakers. If you're not starting, I'm going to have a hard time playing you.
All right. I just realized my overhead light is on.
Yeah.
Really screws the lighting up. You know what I mean? It makes me look as pale as I actually am. You know what I'm saying? Like, if I turn that off, I actually don't look like a ghost.
Oh, well, that's good, I guess.
The magic of lighting, Josh.
The magic of lighting, indeed.
Minnesota, Karl Anthony Towns. Oh, God, no Russell, no Jarrett Culver. We'll kick it off with Cat.
I don't want to kick it off with this Minnesota team, man. I'm tired of it, because here's the problem. I think they're entirely under-owned in an aggressive manner. DraftKings, Towns at 5% ownership. Malik Beasley's at 5. Anthony Edwards at 3. Ricky Rubio at 1.5. I have those guys either 2 or 3 times as likely to be in the optimal, including Anthony Edwards, 6K on DraftKings, 13.7% chance of being in the optimal. 3. You want me to go faster?
No, not you. I'm not talking to you.
Oh, I was like, what, man? Am I talking too slow?
Are you?
Jesus. I have Anthony Edwards, 14% likelihood of being in the optimal on DK. 3% ownership. Like, that's just another guy I want to get a bunch of. I want to get a bunch of Malik Beasley. I want to 2 or 3x the field on Karl Anthony Towns. I even want to get some Rubio, even though he's been absolutely terrible. The one guy that's picking up ownership, Jared Vanderbilt, is at 26% ownership on FanDuel, 19 on DraftKings. He's the one guy I don't want. So I basically want everybody that's not getting ownership on Minnesota, because someone is bound to score.
Yep. And someone said, did he say no Jarrett Culver? Yeah, anybody that's out, usually I'm going to at least say their name. And sometimes it can have an influence, albeit a small one, in the rotation. And sometimes value players can get an extra 5, 7, 8 minutes from someone like that being out, and it makes a difference. In Culver's case, Josh, I don't think it's a huge difference, but he's out.
No, not so much. Yeah. So my recommendation is to play more of Beasley and Edwards and Rubio. Look, just because they're underdogs and I think they stink doesn't mean this game can't be close. They now have no Anthony Davis on the opposite side. It's only a 7.5 point line. If it stays close, Karl Anthony Towns is going to play 32 plus minutes. Malik Beasley is going to play 34 plus minutes. He's played 37 and 36 his last 2 times out. Anthony Edwards played 35 and 34 in his last 2 games. He's 6K and 6K on both sites. I just want a lot more Minnesota. They're getting slept on for reasons that I'm not entirely sure of. I agree. They're not good, but that doesn't mean you just avoid them in DFS.
And having Anthony Davis off the floor is significant, man. Really is. Like, 7, they should be, if Anthony Davis was playing, they're double-digit dogs at home easily. Seriously, they are. So tell me who then, because for the Lakers, it seems like no real priorities, but for Minnesota, are there spots here that you're looking at right now and saying, I really, really like that?
Yeah, Anthony Edwards.
Okay, it is Edwards for you.
Yeah, just because of his ownership, 5% on FanDuel, 3% on DraftKings. I love him as a GP. And to be clear, these guys are all like aggressive GPP plays.
Right.
We're not looking at cash game options, but I would rank them Edwards, Beasley, Towns, Rubio from those 4. I understand the appeal for Jared Vanderbilt. He got 23.5 minutes the last time out. There's not a lot of value out there right now, but even at 20 to 24 minutes, he's not someone that I'm ultra worried about breaking me. So I'm hoping that we just get more value so that goes away. Actually, that's not even true. I'm hoping we don't get more value, and I'm hoping people play 26% of Jared Vanderbilt so I can just not do that and be different elsewhere. But I'm going to have a lot more Minnesota than the field if this ownership holds up.
James says, Laffy, that Pelicans team did make the playoffs with Rondo and Drew Holiday, spelled Dreu. They beat Portland in the first round, and Drew and Rondo shut down Dollar Dame. You're right. They they embarrassed them. As a matter of fact, they swept them. You're right. And then I think they got swept in the next round by Golden State, Josh.
Yeah, they ran into the juggernaut Warriors.
They ran into the buzzsaw.
They were very big underdogs in that Portland series, and they just smacked them around, which was kind of wild.
Very embarrassing series for Terry Stotts and the Blazers. Very embarrassing.
I thought that was going to be the impetus for shipping one of those guys out, and they held serve, obviously.
Me too. I'm a Terry Stotts fan, though. I don't know what it is. I like the guy. You know?
I think it's fine.
I like it. He's a gentleman and a scholar.
He's generally really easy to project his rotation, so I prefer him in DFS.
I've had dinner with him a couple of times and just liked the guy. Speaking of, what's that?
You know you didn't.
I didn't like him? Sure I did. You don't tell me who I like.
You have never had dinner with Terry
Portland and OKC. You've got the Portland Trailblazers on the road. Look at that timing, huh? That's what we in the biz call a segue, folks. 6-point favorites, OKC, 226 total. What are we doing with the Rodney Hood and Harry Giles-less Portland Trailblazers?
We are playing all of the Damian Lillard, and I want to go on record right now. He's projected for 31% ownership on FanDuel and 24.5% on DraftKings. You crazy morons playing all these Jared Vanderbilts and all these other idiots with tons of ownership. I have Damian Lillard at 50% of the optimal lineups.
People hate Dame, Josh. They hate playing this guy. They just think he stinks.
He's 9,500 on FanDuel, 9,700 on DraftKings. He's going to have 35% usage. He's going to be projected for 30 points and 11 assists and 5 boards in a pace-up spot against an Oklahoma City team that is playing half of these guys that'll never play again in the league once these guys are healthy. This is insane to me. He is the clear-cut number one play. I don't understand how he's not owned more. It makes no sense whatsoever. The idea of getting a 40% owned or whatever Nikola Jokic in comparison to $9,500 Dame is ludicrous. This is the spot. Dame everywhere. First guy in cash, no matter what. He's the best play on the slate on both sites, and that won't change no matter what happens unless Dame gets ruled out. I don't get it. I don't get it at all.
I don't either. You know what else I don't get? They call him Dame Dollar. Doesn't Dollar Dame sound a lot better?
No.
You don't think so?
No.
Really? It just flows off the tongue way better.
Now, Dollar Dame implies that he's like on the value menu. Dame Dollar doesn't give that connotation that he's worth $1.
Yes, it does. What are you talking about? How does rearranging where the word is signify how much that dollar is worth?
Well, I mean, it does for me. You're the one that's trying to rearrange it. I'm agreeing with the correct version of it. You're the one trying to change it. You tell me why you want to rearrange
it. What does dollar stand for, by the way?
I don't know, man.
It's Jordan should know this. Jordan Klein producing the show. Jordan, see, this is why I want a window for you where we can pull you in and he can pop up because I know he knows this. It's an acronym, Josh. DOLLA with periods in between each letter.
I assume chat's going to get there, but
they usually do.
I don't know what.
Say that again.
Well, there were way too many letters in there for what that actually was.
Well, if you didn't think Dollar Dame sounded good the first time, you certainly do now.
Oh, man. Unbelievable. All right.
By the way, there's no question that chat has turned on me after that comment, particularly our boy El Negro Loco. All right, so Dame Dollar.
You could just call him Damian Lillard, man.
Dame Dollar, not Dollar, by the way, is one of your top overall plays on the slate?
Yep. Not even, he's number one with a bullet, number one contender on both. Portland is the best team that you can play today by far. And I don't know why they're not getting more ownership. It doesn't make sense. They don't have a ton of bodies either. No Harry Giles, no Rodney Hood, no CJ McCollum, no Yusuf Nurkic. I have these guys massively, massively underowned on both sites, clear across the board. This is a pace-up spot against an Oklahoma City team that isn't very good. 26% of the time I have Cantor in the optimal lineup. He's owned less than that. 25% of the time I have Gary Trent in the optimal lineup. He's owned less than that. Derrick Jones Jr. is 4,500 on FanDuel and 3,700 on DraftKings. He's going to play north of 30 minutes, and for some reason, Derrick Jones Jr. is only owned 6% on DK. when we're giving 20% ownership to a bunch of other guys under 4K. We know he's going to play. He has to be out there. And his skill set fits this game perfectly. Pace up, an Oklahoma City team that you would expect is going to turn the ball over regularly. You get Derek Jones Jr. on a couple of runouts on a steal, hammering from who the hell knows where because he dunks like crazy. I love Derek Jones Jr. Robert Covington is getting no ownership. He's essentially the backup 5. I'll happily play a ton of Carmelo Anthony, who's also going underowned. Anthony Simons exists on this team and is going to play 25 plus minutes as a value play. I want their like main 7 guys aggressively. If I add up just how frequently Portland finishes in the optimal lineup, 168%. That's just the aggregate. The total number doesn't matter. Their ownership is 93. I have them like twice as likely to be in the optimal as their ownership is showing. I love Portland more than I love anything else on this slate. You should be playing them everywhere.
Yeah, that is very, very, very convincing, Josh. Enthusiasm is unlike anything unmatched enthusiasm from you.
I don't understand why these guys aren't getting more ownership. It makes no sense to me.
That's why you come here, right? That's why you come to this show, because you're not just going to get the vanilla black and white takes here. We want to give you something else. And you're saying right now, if there's one spot to really, really go after and exploit that low ownership, it is this Portland team, or at least under-owned players.
Yes, without question. Lillard, Cantor, Trent, Jones, Anthony, Covington, and Simons. I have all on FanDuel and DraftKings. Every single one of them to some degree is under-owned to me. That's insane. I don't even know how to do that.
Yeah, I think Trent too. I think I've talked about this a lot though, but the guy's actually playing pretty solid basketball. He's getting 36 plus minutes in competitive games, and his price is actually continuously dropping on DraftKings. So you're right. Would you set a rule with how many of them you'd allow in a lineup together? Because like yesterday, Houston was still a 7-game slate, and I had lineups with 5 Houston in them. What about this one though, with Portland on a 6-gamer?
So I wouldn't have Dame as any part of that, obviously. I wouldn't have Cantor in any part of that. What you're really trying to do is sort of limit the amount of times you're loading up on Trent, Jones, Anthony, Covington, and Simons. I would say probably like maybe max 2 of those guys. You know, I don't mind having 3 if you don't have Cantor or Lillard in that particular lineup. I mean, you're trying to, I guess, project the closing lineup, but they just don't really have bodies, and they don't really run a very deep rotation. Like the only, like maybe CJ Ellaby gets like a minute or 2, but they're really just going to run 8 guys out there. So I'm not too worried about any of the overlapping effects for this lineup. I wouldn't want to go crazy and have Trent, Jones, Anthony, and Covington. Like that seems problematic. But Lillard plus Cantor plus 2 of those guys is fine by me.
By the way, I forget about the lettering arrangements in Dame Dollar's name. How great are the Hulu Have Live Sports commercials with Dame and Embiid? Have you seen them? They are very good.
They're great. Baker Mayfield too, right?
Yeah. But the guy opens up the briefcase with the stacks of money in it, and he's like, "You think you can make this work?" Very good stuff. Very good.
He's got those DOLLAs, man.
Yeah, that's right. What are we doing with the OKC Thunder on the other side of this game? I think I mentioned it already, Josh, but 226 total. It's not an insanely high total, but this is also one of those games that with so many key players out from both sides, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Teo Maledon out for OKC, it just opens a lot up. Now, the pricing is beginning to reflect their production and their opportunity in OKC because these guys have been out for so long now. But, you know, Al Horford continues to play well. I worry that he doesn't play more than 30 minutes in regulation ever, but he's played well. And Diallo coming off the bench last game still had a decent enough performance. What are we doing with the rest of OKC?
Running it all back right again. Here comes the second rant of the day, right straight from Oklahoma City. Again, Al Horford, 12.5% owned on FanDuel, 13.6% owned on DraftKings. I don't know what people need to understand about Al Horford's role in this offense. It's high usage. He's the point guard of the team, maybe not in positional designation, but in the actual things that are happening on the floor. He's doing everything. I don't understand why he's not more owned.
And Diallo came off the bench, right? Last game. So it takes another guy that's a potential ball handler off the floor for the starting lineup to start both halves.
He looks incredible, but it's not just him. Just like Portland, Horford, Diallo, Kenrich Williams, Darius Baisley, Lou Dort, all under-owned on FanDuel and on DraftKings in my model. I love loading up on these guys. I like all 5 of them aggressively. I'm going to be well over the field on most of them. Darius Baisley at 6,100 stands out to me at 7% ownership on DraftKings. I want every one of those guys in a pretty large manner. I have very little interest in Roby, Muscala, or Darius Miller. I think Justin Jackson is mildly viable because of his positional setup on DK, but I think he's the only one that's actually going over-owned. Whether Diallo starts or not, I don't think it matters all that much. Honestly, I think I'd probably prefer knowing that he wasn't starting because he's going to have to play a ton one way or the other. They just don't have guys like him. So even at 28 minutes, I think he's a really nice value, and maybe that'll keep people off of him a little bit. But you should be smashing Oklahoma City. It's not like Portland's a good defense. Enes Kanter has never anchored a good defense in his life. This is a perfect spot for a team that's shorthanded. I'm going to have just absolute infinite amounts of exposure to this game and hope I get the pieces right.
Wow. And like, who actually cares if you're people ask, so should you game stack in this? It's not about that. It's just both sides of this game are really, really appealing. Al Horford leads the team in potential assists since Gilgeous-Alexander went down. Justin Jackson last game, though, did have 8, which was second on the team, and did play 34 minutes. I can understand where you're coming from in saying that he could be over-owned potentially, but I don't think it's absurd. Like 21% at 4,700 on DraftKings. I think that's okay just because if he does get this many minutes, right? If he does play 35 minutes on a team that's already shorthanded, doesn't have any predominant ball handlers, doesn't have any predominant go-to scorers that you can just put the ball in their hand and let them go to work, it gives him, it at least puts him in a position, Josh, where you can have that solid game where maybe he does score 25 fantasy points because they don't have a Dame, they don't have a LeBron or an Embiid or a Giannis. They just have a bunch of guys.
Yeah, the price tag is really what's slowing me down there. When I look at it, I see Lou Dort at 5,400, Justin Jackson at 4,700, and Jackson's twice his own. Like I just read, I think they're comparable plays today, but for some reason one's pulling the ownership and the other isn't. So I would rather just flip-flop those guys. It's not that I don't think Jackson is fine, but I mean, like he's not good normally from a per minute basis. You need him to get every one of those minutes. He's like the opposite of Chris Boucher.
Yep. And, you know, you and I talked about this. Terry McBride and I talked about this on Sunday. Actually, no, because we didn't have the news on Hayward, you and I in the morning. Terry McBride and I said, the Miles Bridges ownership is kind of absurd because he could play 35 plus minutes and do nothing. And that's precisely what he did. He could have also had a decent game, but he's not a high usage guy playing with, you know, all of those other players, whether it be Ball and Rozier, you name it. I think the one thing about this OKC team that's interesting, just going back to whether it's Dort, whether it's Horford, whether it's Isaiah Roby, whether it's Baisley or Justin Jackson, there is no alpha score, which means that the distribution of fantasy points should actually be much better on these lower priced guys than some of these other teams. And I think Horford, we still need to be looking at him very, very closely because he is your ball handling, quote unquote, guard right now.
Yeah, I love this game so much for fantasy. I pray that the ownership doesn't climb later today. Okay, let's just say it like this. On FanDuel, Portland's projected for 97% total ownership. Oklahoma City, 91.1. That's 188%. I hope that if Locke was right now, that if they were owned at 188% total, that I would be well north of 300 from this game.
Yep. I like it.
This is the spot for me.
Justin Jackson, 0.66 DraftKings points per minute for his career, by the way. You need those minutes. There's no doubt.
I have him at 0.75 as the baseline rate, and that still makes him look yuck.
Yep. Right. So, ready to move on to this last game?
Let's close it out.
Let's talk about it. Guys, you hear us talk reference ownership. You hear us talk about Alex Baker, Awesemo. You know who he is, I'm sure. #1 ranked DFS player. He built all of these tools and put them on the site. These are the same tools that he uses to win a ton of money. I saw him at the top of a bunch of contests again yesterday because I was in them and not at the top of those contests. But whether it's the ownership, whether it's the player projections, the boom bust tool, the top stacks tool, the lineup builder, we have a fantasy cruncher add-on, which is huge for you guys looking to make multiple lineups quick, and so much more. All of our premium articles, the data set, like, I don't know, Josh, there's so much that I don't even have time to get to. We have so much good content, useful content, not just filler shit on the site. And go to the Awesemo Hall of Fame page. Check it out on Twitter. Like, people are winning a lot of money right now, and they're using these tools. It's an exciting time to be playing DFS, to be able to use these tools. And we've got weekly passes, monthly passes, annual, whether you want to do one sport or every sport, we've got you covered no matter what it is at awesemo.com/join. All right. Oh, and help us get to 30,000 Twitter followers on Twitter at Awesemo_com. More importantly, though, follow Josh at Josh Engleman and myself at Loughie_D, LOUGHY_D. All right, ready to close it out?
Let's do it.
Brooklyn playing their second leg of a back-to-back. Kevin Durant missing both of these games. I laid the points on Brooklyn yesterday against Sacramento because they are bad. I'm laying the points on Phoenix tonight against Brooklyn playing their second of a back-to-back on the road. Phoenix just chopping metaphorical heads off on the hardwood lately. Suns are playing great basketball. I think Brooklyn needs Kevin Durant to beat them tonight. So that's just my 2 cents. But what are we doing with Harden coming off a big game and Kyrie Irving coming off a very strong scoring performance against the Kings?
So I am doing basically nothing. I don't have any of these guys in the optimal lineup on FanDuel or DraftKings more than 9.7%. The highest owned guy in this game is James Harden at 12%. I guess that's fine. I find Brooklyn to be mostly uninteresting. I do want to point out on FanDuel today, I have James Harden projected for 48.3 fantasy points. Alex has him at 49.2. So what was a 10-plus point gap yesterday has been closed to 0.9. Now I don't feel as totally insane. I actually have more points projected to Kyrie than Alex does today. So I have no idea how we're reconciling this, but makes me feel pretty good because I haven't changed anything. So nice to see you near me now, boss man.
Yeah, for sure.
Needed it though, because I truly felt crazy to the point where if I looked at this and Harden was projected for 59 from Alex, I had to get 15 minutes on the calendar today to talk to him and figure out why. I've never been so flummoxed by a gap in projection in my life.
So this is tough for me because yesterday I thought Harden was in a very strong position. There were Joel Embiid was out. There weren't a ton of high-end players. Today, you do have Giannis, you do have Jokic, you do have Lillard, you do have LeBron without Anthony Davis. Yeah. That's one of the reasons it's really going to suppress the ownership on James Harden. Do I think it's crazy to run him out there in any spot when Kevin Durant's not on the floor? No, but I'm not surprised to see his ownership down, Josh. There are so many good players at similar price points and cheaper price points to James Harden. It makes sense.
And I mentioned it earlier. I think Brooklyn, at least on FanDuel, I don't have it on DraftKings in front of me right now, but I guess I could pull that information. I think Brooklyn is the worst team on the slate from a DFS perspective today. They're the team I will have the least of.
Well, I wouldn't say Alex totally disagrees with you here. It is 7% the highest owned player.
There you go. I love
it. And last one, just because of his price point, DeAndre Jordan. Any thoughts here? He did play 27 minutes last game, 37 prior to that, before he missed those 2 games. Is DeAndre Jordan at all appealing against Phoenix?
I'm curious to see if he starts because he could be.
I think he could be too.
He didn't start, but it feels like him starting against DeAndre Ayton would be like a more reasonable stance. If he starts, I'd have at least a small amount of interest in him. But I would much rather go to Al Horford at center. I would much rather go to Cantor. We still have Jokic and Towns and Ayton in this game. Center's pretty loaded today, so I wouldn't be all that worried about DeAndre Jordan either way. He looks a little bit better if he starts, though.
From DeAndre Jordan to DeAndre Ayton, amazingly, DeAndre Ayton looks years older than DeAndre Jordan, but that's not the case. The guy looks like he's, solid 45, Josh.
That makes him look youthful as far as I'm concerned.
On the floor for Phoenix, him, Chris Paul, Devin Booker, all of these guys playing great basketball. But from a DFS standpoint, it's been kind of tough to hitch your cart to the Phoenix Suns lately.
Yeah, I don't really see much here from a DFS perspective. They're finally back and at full strength. Everybody is here. So, Chris Paul is going to play his 33 minutes. Campaign's going to back him up. DeAndre Ayton's going to play his 32 to 34 minutes. Dario Saric is going to back him up. We're going to split our wing minutes. Devin Booker is going to play 34 to 36 minutes. None of these guys stand out. It is a great matchup in terms of being pace up against a team that's terrible defensively, but Phoenix is so slow because of Chris Paul. Nobody's picking up a ton of ownership. I think they're all like 10%-ish type guys. Unless somebody gets ruled out, I see Phoenix as filler, and I will not have large exposure to the late night hammer, which is scary.
All right. Free content on the site today. NBA player rankings, PGA pro plays, NHL player and top stack rankings, and the NBA deeper dive. You can't beat it, Josh. Just throwing free content out there like nothing.
You cannot beat any of that free content. Plus, Ben Razin and I will be recording our PGA contenders, our best bets later today. That'll be going out. We'll have multiple hours worth of shows coming up later after this. It just never stops. Whether there's free content on the website or shows on our YouTube channel or podcast feed, we have so much on a day-to-day basis. It's insane.
It is. And be sure to start your morning off with Josh Monday through Friday. Monday through Friday?
What? Monday through Friday? Yes.
The process show, is it Monday through Friday?
Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m.
6:30 a.m. Goes through the process of making the rotation, setting the minutes, and all of that great stuff. It should really help you guys, and it's enjoyable. And, you'll have to deal with him, but he's going to give you good information. So be sure to check that out. And coming up later, it's the tip-off show, followed by Deeper Dive, followed by Live Before Lock, PGA Strategy show at 2 p.m. today, NHL Strategy show with Jake Hari and Cliffy at 3 p.m. Like Josh said, it never ends. Oh, and you got the Game Plan show at 3 p.m. as well. I don't know which one of our amazing – it's going to be Sean's on. So just hang around. That's a premium show, but we got you covered throughout the day. Anything you need right here at the Awesemo YouTube channel. Show some love. Hit that thumbs up and subscribe before you head out. Josh, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, that is it for me. I got to go record with Ben Raza, and then go Liverpool. Champions League is back. Red Bull Leipzig, they're going down.
All right, we'll see you guys next time. Yeah. Josh and I back here tomorrow on the Strategy Show.